All right, so today we're going to unlock some serious potential because we are diving deep into this concept that really made me stop and think, raising your standards. It's one of those
Hmm.
things, it sounds kind of simple, like on the surface,
Right.
but the more I was looking at these notes that you sent over,
Yeah.
the more I was like, wow, this actually affects like every single part of our lives. Every single part.
It's like the DNA of our choices,
Yeah.
right? And the sources that you sent over, they really emphasize that this isn't about just like having a tidy house or
Right.
like hitting deadlines at work.
Mm.
It's really about the invisible thermostat that we set
Okay.
for the quality of experiences that we're willing to accept in love, in work,
Wow.
in our health, like literally everything.
I love that analogy of a thermostat. Like we're setting the temperature for the kind of life we want. What really struck me though is like, it's not just about the external stuff.
Yeah,
It's a reflection of how we value ourselves deep down.
absolutely. And what's so fascinating is that the source material that you sent me
Mm.
really kind of argues that a lot of us, most of us actually, are living below our true capacity for self-worth.
Yeah.
It's like we've inherited these limiting beliefs about what we actually deserve.
Right.
And then we end up settling in all these areas of our lives without even realizing it.
Oh, yeah. It's
Yeah.
so true. Like I can think of so many times in my own life where that's happened and I'm like, why did I
Yeah.
I remember reading one of the studies in here. It was talking about how people with higher self-worth standards actually attract better opportunities.
Yeah.
And it's not about being arrogant.
Well,
It's like this signal that you're sending out that you're not settling for second best.
it's like that saying, you accept the love you think you deserve.
Right. Exactly.
And it applies to your career, to your friendships,
Mm-hmm.
even to your own self-care.
Yeah.
So when you raise your standards,
Mm-hmm.
you're really making a statement about your inherent worthiness.
So how do we do it? Like, how do we actually raise our standards? The
Mhm.
notes you sent talked about like steps.
Hmm.
And I have to admit, I was a little skeptical at first. Can we just decide
Right.
to raise our standards or is it more complicated?
Well, it is a process.
Mm.
And
Mm.
like any worthwhile journey, it takes effort, it takes intention.
Right.
But the good news is it starts with something really simple, awareness.
Mm-hmm.
You first have to identify like what your standards actually are,
Yep.
which, let's be honest, can be a little uncomfortable.
It's like holding up a mirror, right, to our own lives.
Yeah.
And you're like, ooh, I don't know if I like what I see. For me, it was time, like I used to think I was just being easygoing by
Mhm.
always saying yes to extra projects. But when I really looked at it, my standard for protecting my time was non-existent. Like
Yeah.
I was valuing other people's priorities over my own well-being.
That's a perfect example of how these unconscious standards can really hold us back.
Yeah.
Because you weren't being easygoing, you were actually undervaluing your time and your energy.
Right.
And that is a common pattern that we see, right?
Right.
We mistake those low standards for maybe being flexible or being nice,
Right.
when really what we're doing is dimming our own light a little bit.
It's so true. It's so true. So if the first step is awareness, like what's next? What
Yeah.
comes after that?
Mm.
How do we actually set these higher standards in a way that feels like authentic and achievable?
Yeah, well, the source material really emphasizes that it's not just about setting a higher bar, right?
Yeah.
But it's making sure that that bar is actually aligned with your values, not what you think it should be based on maybe societal expectations or other people's opinions.
So it's about like what we really want,
Yes.
not what we've been like conditioned to think we should want.
Exactly.
This whole idea of like, I think they call it defining your non-negotiables.
Yes.
Really resonated with me.
Yeah, because it's about reclaiming your power and deciding these are the things that I will no longer compromise on in my relationships, in my work, in my health, in my life.
That's where things get really interesting.
Yes.
Because once we've identified these non-negotiables, it's like a fundamental shift in how we approach every decision, every interaction. Like we're upgrading our operating system.
Exactly. And that upgrade can feel daunting at first,
Yeah.
which is why I think the source material dedicates a whole section to this idea of like rewiring your internal compass.
Okay.
It's about identifying those limiting beliefs and that negative self-talk that might be holding you back.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much we're influenced by those voices, right?
Right.
It's like those voices in our heads.
Yeah.
And the source material is pointing out that many of us walk around with these inner critics
Ugh, yes, I know them
who
well.
are constantly telling us we're not good enough
Huh?
or smart enough
Yeah.
or deserving enough to even have these higher standards.
Yeah, it's like this negative talk show that's just playing on a loop in my mind sometimes.
Mm.
How do we change the channel? Like, how do we deal with these beliefs?
Yeah,
Because they can really sabotage us.
absolutely. Well, the sources you shared, they kind of suggest this two-pronged approach,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
First, you have to become aware of those negative thought patterns,
Yeah.
right?
So,
Start to pay attention to that internal dialogue.
mm-hmm.
What are you telling yourself, especially like when you're stressed,
Yeah.
when you're feeling insecure, or when you're facing a challenge? What is that voice saying?
So it's about really listening to ourselves,
Yes.
noticing those moments when it's like, oh,
Right.
that's that inner critic.
That's it.
Okay.
And once you've identified those negative thought patterns, then you can start to challenge them.
Okay.
Like question their validity. Are these thoughts even true, or are these just old tapes playing on repeat?
That's where things get a little tricky, though, right?
Yeah.
Because they feel so real,
Sure.
so ingrained in like who we are. How do we start to shift that?
Well, one of the things that the source material really emphasizes is the power of reframing.
Okay.
It's about consciously choosing to view those challenges and those setbacks not as failures, but as opportunities for growth and learning.
Oh, so like changing the narrative.
Yes.
Instead of being like, oh, I messed up,
Yeah.
I'm not good enough.
Right.
It's like, okay, that didn't go as planned.
Yeah.
But what can I learn from this experience? How can I use this to kind of move forward with more wisdom and resilience? It's exactly. It's about embracing that growth mindset, which the source material points out is essential for raising your standards.
Right.
It's about viewing challenges as opportunities for expansion, not threats to our ego.
Which is so hard to do sometimes. It takes practice.
It does.
Speaking of perspective, the source material also talks about, surrounding yourself
Yes.
with people who inspire us, who embody those higher standards that we are
Right.
striving for.
Oh, this is huge because our social circles,
Mm-hmm.
they can either lift us up or hold us back, right?
Yeah.
If we're constantly surrounded by people who are content with mediocrity,
Right.
who don't believe in their own potential, it's going to be that much harder to raise our own bar.
It's like we absorb the energy
Yes.
of the people we're around.
100%. So if we want to raise our standards, we got to be around people who inspire us, who challenge us to grow, who celebrate our victories along the way.
And the source material takes it even a step further.
Okay.
It suggests that we proactively seek out mentors,
Okay.
role models,
Mm-hmm.
or even just friends who embody the standards that we're aiming for.
Yeah. So it's like actively curating our social circle,
Exactly.
choosing to spend time with those people who light us up, who inspire us to be better.
Yes, and surrounding yourself with that kind of positive, growth-oriented energy, it makes a world of difference.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's that Jim Rohn quote, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
There is.
And if we're serious about raising our standards, we need to look at, like, who are those people?
Yes.
And is that who I want to be?
Absolutely. And this ties into another point that the source material makes, which is the importance of taking action.
Okay.
Because it's not enough to just think about raising your standards
Right.
or even surrounding yourself with inspiring people.
Yeah, you have to, like, do the thing.
You have to do it.
You got to walk the walk.
You have to put in the work.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, raising your standards is not just about thinking differently.
Mhm.
It's about living differently.
Yeah, it's about those actions.
Yes.
Turning those aspirations into concrete steps.
Precisely. Aligning your actions with your new standards, even when it's uncomfortable,
Right.
even when those old patterns and those limiting beliefs try to creep back in.
It's like we're building a new muscle.
We are.
And like any
Yes.
muscle, it takes consistent effort and practice
Yeah,
to strengthen it over time.
100%.
Yeah.
And the source material has some really practical tips for that.
Right.
Like, for example, one of the things that it suggests is actually creating what they call a non-negotiables list
Okay.
for different areas of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So for your relationships,
Yeah.
your work, your self-care,
Right.
whatever it might be.
So it's not just this vague idea
Yeah.
of like, what does it look like to have higher standards? It's like actually writing them down.
Exactly.
Yeah, making it tangible. Like we're creating a roadmap
Exactly.
for ourselves.
Yes, a set of guiding principles to help us stay on track.
Yeah.
Because, the source material doesn't shy away from it. Raising your standards, it can be challenging.
Yeah.
It's not always going to be easy.
Right.
And there will be times where you face resistance, both internal and external.
So like when those old limiting beliefs are like, nope, not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
like when people around us are not so into it.
Exactly.
Mm.
It can be tough to break free from those old patterns, especially when they're so deeply ingrained.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, honestly, it's the people we care about the most
Right.
who unintentionally hold us back.
Because they're used to us being at a certain level.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It's like they almost have a vested interest in us staying the same, even if it's not serving us anymore.
Totally. And that's why the source material was talking about setting boundaries
Yes.
with ourselves and with others.
Yes.
Learning to say no, even when it's uncomfortable,
It's hard.
even when it might disappoint someone.
Absolutely.
But we can still do it with compassion, right? Like the source material talks about that.
Absolutely. Because remember, most people aren't intentionally trying to hold us back.
Right.
Often, they just haven't done the work themselves.
Yeah. They don't know.
They don't understand why you might be making different choices.
Exactly.
So it's about communicating your needs clearly, compassionately, but also letting go of the need to control their reaction.
Okay, so focusing on what we can control.
Yes,
Our choices, our actions. That's powerful.
it is. And you know what else the source material suggested?
What's that?
Celebrate your progress.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be anything big or fancy, right?
Right.
But taking the time to acknowledge how far you've come
Mm-hmm.
and celebrating those small victories,
Yeah.
it makes a world of difference in staying motivated on this journey.
It's like giving ourselves a little pat on the back.
Yes.
Like, hey, good job. You did the hard thing.
Exactly.
Even though it was hard.
Exactly. And those small celebrations, they add up to create a powerful sense of momentum,
Right.
which fuels us to keep going.
So it sounds like raising our standards is about so much more than just like setting higher goals.
It is.
It's really about cultivating a whole new way of being,
It is.
one that values our self-worth,
Yeah.
that prioritizes our growth and embraces the challenges that come along the way.
Beautifully said. And remember, this is a journey.
Right. It's not like a one and...
It's not a destination, it's a journey.
Yeah.
There will be ups and downs, twists and turns.
Oh, yeah.
But if you stay committed to these principles, I have no doubt you'll create a life that truly reflects your highest potential.
This has been amazing.
It has.
We covered so much.
We did.
Like what standards are, how to raise them,
Yes.
all parts of our lives. But you know me, I always like to leave our listeners with something to think about.
Of course.
And we've talked a lot about identifying those non-negotiables, those things that we are not willing to compromise on anymore. So my question for you is, what's one small, meaningful action you can take this week to start living in closer alignment with those non-negotiables? Maybe it's setting a boundary or having a tough conversation or just saying no to something that doesn't feel right. Whatever it is, we challenge you. Take that step and let us know what happens.